You want to? Okay, we'll call to order the meeting of the Hingham Municipal Lighting Board for March 21st, 2023. This meeting is being offered remotely as an alternate means of public access pursuant to Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022 and all other applicable laws, temporarily amending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You're hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of the meeting in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. Is there anyone else who would like to record this meeting? If not, then we will just proceed to the agenda, and we have two items on the agenda, which is to review the rate design from Utility Financial Services, and also to consider whether we'd like to endorse this invitation to other light commissioners to form a light commissioners association. And we figure we'll do the first item first, since we don't have everybody from Utility Financial Services with us. So I think Mike and Tyler, you both have the invitation, and this comes from the group of light commissioners that have been meeting off and on for the last 2 years. And I think Tom has been to one or two of the meetings where we have educational sessions where we find out about stuff that could help us do our work. And we're feeling that we want to expand the group to involve all light commissioners. It previously has just been by invitation, I know so-and-so and you know so-and-so, but we want to make a big push and see how many light commissioners we can get involved in it, because we think the work we've been doing would be valuable for everybody. So we're asking light boards to endorse the invitation, or individual commissioners, if their light boards can't meet before then. Wellesley Light Board has already endorsed it. So I wonder if anybody has any questions. Or comments.
I'm very supportive. I think it's a really good idea to get people around the table and discussing the issues that need to be discussed. So I'm in favor of this, Laura. Okay.
Thoughts, Tyler?
I'm definitely supportive of it myself. How often does this association meet?
Well, over the last 2 years, we've met every week, every month, but that's really, I've been pulling together all the meetings and finding the speakers. It's not really sustainable in the long run. So what we were thinking was to have an annual meeting of, anything that should come before the association, but maybe quarterly educational meetings on various topics. That's what we're thinking of, but it'd be up to people who join to say what they want. Our idea is to have a meeting in April and have an interesting speaker, preferably about demand response. I'm looking for somebody to speak on that, and then have the discussion about whether or not to form an association at that meeting and see what people are interested in. Really, once a month is too often to keep going. It's too often for me. Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to endorse the invitation.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Mike?
Aye.
Tyler?
Aye.
Laura? Aye. Okay, thanks very much. And I see Mark has joined us, so right on time. Thank you.
Morning, Mike. Mike?
Looks like we lost Mark again.
Yeah.
It's having trouble connecting too.
There I am. Sorry about that. My computer just kind of glitched on me. Can everybody hear me?
Yep,
Yes,
we can
yes,
hear you.
yes,
Yep.
we can hear
Oh,
you.
yeah. Okay, great. Um,
Welcome.
so the last time we talked about things with the rate designs and the strategies going forward. Mike, do we have a presentation on the rate designs?
Yeah,
You
we-
sent us
we-
the PDF of, laying out each rate in
Ah,
detail.
gotcha. That's okay. Yeah. Which one is it, Mike?
I think I sent it yesterday. I think I can probably share it. Where is it?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and share it? Can't seem to find it in our Dropbox.
Screen. Okay. You can see it now. Mark.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah, go ahead. Thanks, Mike. Overall, we were looking at 6% rate adjustments was a direction, and we want to go through the rate designs to see any questions you might have on it. Any anything else you want to discuss or see with the rate designs? Overall, Mike, why don't you go to the one that shows the percent adjustment for each class?
It's not in here, Mark. It's just
Oh,
a.
it's not. Oh,
Each
okay.
one has
You
its
have to do them
own
individually. So
percentage.
Oh, why don't we go through each one individually then? The the cost of service study said that the residential facilities charge should go up at a higher rate than the energy rates. So what we did is we put a $2 increase each year in the monthly facilities charge from $8.86 to $10.86 the first year. And as part of that, then we were able to adjust. Well, the other thing we did too is the capacity transmission and distribution charges. You had it set at 10.7, but our study said it should be 8.2. So we actually lowered the distribution charge. And then the energy rate, that was set at 5 cents. And the study showed it should be closer to 8.2. So we set that at 8 point, should go up. So we balance it out. You see the energy rates went up slightly from 15.7 to 16.4. And overall, that's a 6.6% adjustment. If you look at the chart just below this, the impacts on customers at different usage levels in year one is going to be right around at 500 kilowatt hours, they'd see about a 6% increase. Below that, they're going to see a little bit higher, below 500. But most of the customers are going to be right around that 5 to 7% range in year one. In year two, it's going to be fairly consistently around that 6.6 again. In other words, nobody's going to see a dramatic rate change as a result of it. It's going to be about 6.6%. As far as the dollar impact, at 500 kilowatt hours, they would see a little over a $5 increase, closer to maybe $5.50, $6. Higher user customers would see increases. In year one, that's going to be right around about $20 a month. That's at 2,700 kilowatt hours. So one of the main questions, this is obviously one of the biggest rate class, is do you have any questions about this or the impact? We tried to levelize it so that nobody saw a dramatic change. Just wondering if there's any questions about the residential.
I'm going to ask Mike and Todd. It's hard for me to see you over there on the side. So if you have something to ask or to speak up, just jump in, please, because I might not see you if you raise your hand. I have a couple of questions about, just taking this as it is, I'm surprised that the charge that includes the transmission charge would be going down, because we have this enormous capital project that's coming down the pike that is a large part of why rates need to go up. So I'm wondering in which part of the charge is that transmission cost that we're projecting. Where do we see that?
That's in that capacity transmission and distribution charge.
So
I'm
even
not
though.
sure how the 10.7 cents was established.
Mhm.
The number that you're seeing from us at 8.2, that came directly out of the cost of service model, which includes the recovery. I think my point being is it was probably set too high previously and the energy charge too low.
Or it may
Part of
have
the
wandered over the years from what the cost of service was when it was set.
Correct. You know, one thing to think about too, and what we did is we're setting it to be consistent with the cost of service. And, you know, sometimes there's a strategy, especially years ago when customer choice started and we're customers had an option for different energy suppliers. Sometimes the utilities set those capacity charges higher than they should, just to protect themselves. I mean, that's just a speculation, but I don't know.
Who knows?
I could add a couple of things to that, just that we're not at full cost of service for the facilities charge, so some of that's going into there as well. And the energy charge was what was in the cost of service, and then we balanced it with the capacity charge.
What do you mean you balanced it?
We balanced it to the revenue requirement for the class, the overall 6.6% increase.
And that's because the facilities charge isn't where you want it to be.
It isn't where we want it to be
So,
now.
yeah, so you have to make up for it somewhere.
Yep.
Okay. So here's my big question. Based on our last few conversations, I imagine that we were heading towards a rate design that involves time of use rates, and this is not that. So I wonder if you can tell me about that.
Well, I think that's the next step. We have to establish. Yeah.
So this is just what each class will be.
Yeah.
Well, given that, okay, so I guess you'll explain that to me when we get to the next step. But I noticed that this, and I'm paging through. I'm just looking at the table of contents, which is that you've gone through the rates that we have and assigned cost to those classes. And we're imagining that if we had a full time of use rate structure, that we would not have some of these rates at all. I didn't know we had a small farm G1B rate. Is that on our website? I don't recognize that. I thought I'd been through all the rates and looked at them, and I don't recognize that one. So what's going to happen if you do give us a time of use rate structure is that some of these rates that are no longer necessary because they were meant to address things that are addressed by a time of use rate will go away, but then you'll have to, whatever revenue was going to be generated by those rates, you're going to have to generate it from the rates, the time of use rates. Do I have that right?
Right.
Yeah, I do want to just add a little bit to that with when we go to time of use, you know, this is going to be obviously a board's decision. Most utilities they'll do what's called an opt-in program where they offer customers time of use. But they still need to have the standard rate tariff, and customers can choose the time of use. And then some boards, we did this with Lansing last fall, Lansing, Michigan, they took this rate and developed what was called an opt-out program. And all customers are put on the time of use rate. But they still kept the standard rate tariff. So, and these are decisions that the board is going to have to, we're going to have to discuss in further detail with the board. What's going to happen though, and I'm pretty certain, is most utilities end up taking this residential rate, which is a single rate, and end up having 3 rates. At least in the interim, and until we can combine them back together. The reason is the standard rate, like you're seeing here. The other one is a full time of use rate, which goes all the way to the cost-based time of use rates for electric vehicles. And then the phased in adjustment for your standard customers that slowly moves in the direction of time-based rates to minimize customer impacts. And these are questions and decisions that we'll have to discuss with the board moving forward.
Joan.
One thing I'm real concerned about here is the energy of 8 cents you have here. I've never seen it that high. What we usually look at our actual energy costs. And is it just forecasted to go up that high? Is that what you're saying, Mark? Or I don't know why it's so high. That's not our actual energy cost now.
Well, outside of with capacity and demand, market prices in New England are, they're right now you got the 8.1 plus the power cost adjustment. That's about 9.2 cents. That's what's projected on the power supply side. And that doesn't surprise me in New England right now.
And the 1 cent down the bottom, that's all energy?
Yes.
Are you saying the PCA is an adjustment to the energy portion of the bill?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so that's good to know about where the energy costs are going. That's revealing. So is the reason that people will leave, we'll have this policy conversation about first of all, if we want time of use rates. Secondly, how do we want to get from here to there if we decide we do? How long do we want it to take? Is the reason that some utilities choose either an opt-in or an opt-out system is just for customer comfort in terms of making these changes?
A couple of reasons. That's one of them. Another reason is the utilities oftentimes want to utilities oftentimes want to test their systems to make sure that they everything's working, and that gives them time where they're just dealing with a small number, even to the point of putting in a pilot program that maybe for like a very small group, just to test the systems for like 6 months before they roll it out completely. Because it would be a nightmare if you had 1,000 customers on that time of use rate and you find out your billing system's having issues with it.
So that's another thought we can consider when we come to discussing this. I know that Belmont Light Plant did a very successful pilot of a new time of use rate system, and we could learn a lot from what they did. It wasn't just to test their systems, but also to test the receptivity of people. Now, of course, it was volunteers, so I suppose the people who signed up for it would be more inclined to like it than the average customer, but I think they found that very valuable, and we might consider that too.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on this? So we
Mike,
can-
do you
I
want,
have a question.
Tyler,
So I'm curious why we have a power cost adjustment at all. You know, does it make sense to put all of that into the energy, or what's the importance of us having a power cost adjustment in here?
the power cost adjustment is something I would recommend keeping. I would probably say 75% of the utilities around the US have a power cost adjustment. It's because there are things you have control over and things you don't. The energy costs in the New England market or anywhere really, I mean, you have things that happen that can drive the price of natural gas higher. And you don't really have control over that. So that's a mechanism that allows you to pass that on to your customers so that the utility has adequate cash to pay the bills, really.
Yeah, I
It's
definitely understand that part. I guess I'm curious of if my understanding is that power cost adjustment is it's able to be set by Tom at any time. So, but if we have the rate structure, if we set a rate structure, he can always adjust it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. There's another reason I didn't want to roll it in. Mike and I had talked about it, but the reason I didn't want to roll it in to the rate is because power supply costs are high. And if they start to decline, then the power cost adjustment will go negative. And that sometimes can be even a big issue too, as far as fairness. So I didn't want to true it up because I don't have a crystal ball, but I think that the power costs are going to probably stabilize. At least, you know, in the next few years.
Okay.
okay. Anything else on this before Mark continues on? Okay,
So how is the power cost adjustment factor calculated in what you have now compared to where we are now on our actual bills?
How's it adjusted?
Well,
Is that the question?
you have right now you have it in as 0.01095.
Right.
How is that calculated compared to where we are now? That was a board decision to set it at 3.5 for this quarter or so.
I think that was a number that we had that was in our modeling. Is that correct, Mike?
That's what it came out of based on the base in your ordinance at 995. This is
I guess is it going to be a moving target in the future, or I mean it does make the bill a little bit more complicated for people to understand. I guess that's what where I'm going at. Yeah, if we set the rates and suddenly we have a power cost adjustment factor in there, the question is why aren't we zeroing things and then in time moving forward?
it appears to be going up over time fairly significantly.
Yeah.
We
I think that
can true it up.
3.5, that 3.5 is why Joan hasn't seen the energy that high, I think, because part of that 3.5 should be in energy and then part of it should be in the PCA, which is basically the same thing. It's just that you guys do it, you have a PCA and the energy portion.
Right, it's going up in your model over time, but it starts out considerably lower than where it is now. Right now, it's
Yes,
0.5.
correct, and that's just based on how what we said the power supply was going to change by. That's all that's doing on Hyde.
Yeah,
So we're saying 3%. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's
And
gonna
we
go
can-
up by 3% every year.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. That was in our modeling. That's a pass through, so it doesn't really affect because it's picked up in the power cost adjustment. So it doesn't really affect our projection models. I know that sounds kind of unusual, but we can very easily true that up. I mean, that's we can do that real quick. It's not going to change anything you're seeing here. All it would do is bring the PCA from the 1 cent down to 0. And then the energy charge up on top would go up to that 9.2 cents.
Mhm.
And we can do that if the board wants us to. That's not an issue. I the only thing I don't always like the PCA to go negative. And that's part of the reason why I was a little hesitant to true that up. But if the board wants us to, we certainly can.
Well, correct my understanding if it's not right. We want to have this, as you suggest, available to us in future to adjust for changes in the cost of energy going up and down, but we don't want to change the energy charge itself, which I guess I'm not sure. I'm asking Tyler's question again. Why not? Why wouldn't
Yeah.
we just change the energy charge?
Because the way the rate tariffs work is the base rates need any changes would need approval and probably a subsequent rate hearing. But the power cost adjustment is a flow through mechanism that is part of your rate tariffs that allows for automatic adjustments without going through the formal process.
Okay, my next question. I was not aware that we had a hearing on our tariffs.
Well, I'm not, well,
We don't have a hearing on the tariffs.
We just file them.
We just file them with the
We tell the DPU what they
DPU.
are.
right.
yeah, sorry.
So
I
you could
misspoke.
ask whether power cost adjustment serves anything other than it does confuse customers. I know that.
Well, we can zero it, if you like.
Let me see if I can understand how I or explain how I understand. So we have a number of power contracts, from everything from wind and solar to nuclear, et cetera, and that's heading up to around 90% hedged, and the 10% hedged in the real-time market. And depending on how those real-time market LMPs come out, and depending on how we flatten our curve and utilize batteries, et cetera, we are effectively able to control, or hopefully control, how large that PCA would end up being. So if I look at a bunch of bills over a period of time and I see negative PCAs, I would say that the light plant is doing a pretty good job based on market conditions. If I see the PCA going up, like we have seen in recent months and years, I would look for a reason behind that. And I would clearly see that natural gas prices have spiked and now they've since come down, and I would expect the PCA to come down on my bills. So I'm not sure that I agree that having a negative PCA or a close to zero PCA is necessarily a bad thing from being transparent to the ratepayers.
Well, let me ask you a question then, Mike. Wouldn't it actually be more transparent to the ratepayers if they see their energy charge going up and down? They would go, oh, the price of energy is going up and down. I understand that, as opposed to something that says PCA on the bill and goes up and down, and you have to ask somebody what that is. Would it be more transparent the other way?
I could certainly agree with that, yeah. But is it feasible for the energy charges to be floating up and down on a monthly or annual basis?
Right, I guess what's the downside of that is we want to know.
Yeah.
Given that we don't have to go through a hearing to change the energy charge. Is there a downside, Mark, that you are aware of?
Yeah, well, if we roll true that up, and we roll it in, that's going to increase the base. And in the future, if power supply costs do stabilize, that PCA goes negative. What happens with a negative PCA is becomes more of a fairness issue because you have different types of customers in your system. And high load factor customers, they're the ones that use a lot of energy. They actually get a greater benefit more than they should with a negative PCA. And it's because the power cost adjustment includes two components on the power supply side, both the capacity portion and the energy
Oh.
portion.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so that causes more of an equity issue. But we can compromise on this too. I mean, we can take, say, half of that PCA and roll it into the energy. That's another option. And if the PCA does start getting too far negative, if that does occur, we could then go and refile the rates and zero it out. There's a lot of different options available to us. We just want to do what you think is best for your community. And, we can so easily true that up right now. It's a real easy. We can do it in minutes. It's not a big deal for us.
Well, back to Tyler's question. I'm wondering what is the downside of eliminating the power cost adjustment entirely? And rolling the capacity into the capacity section and the energy into the energy section.
Yeah, the downside of that is the financial stability of the utility itself.
Because
if power supply costs go up, it's going to cause the board to go and refile their rate tariffs because it's not automatic. If power supply goes down, you're going to have a windfall of cash and you'd have to refile to put it back in line.
Okay, so the advantage is that it allows us, so, for us, the rate hearing is actually just a filing, but it avoids us having to file our rates again every time power costs go up or down. Do I have that right?
That is correct.
Okay. I have often wondered whether it might be possible to explain right on the bills a little bit better what the power cost adjustment is, but that's another route to go.
Yeah.
And that isn't in fact how I explain it to people when they ask me about it. I just say, well, energy costs go up and down, and it allows us to pass those costs on, or the savings on, to you without a lot of difficulty. Okay, well, maybe we want to consider that some more. I'd like to take that away and think about it some more. I wouldn't want to make a decision about that right now. Mike or Tyler, what do you think?
Yeah,
Can't see Tyler anymore. There you are.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable waiting on that one.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fair.
Tom, what's involved in filing our rates? Joan, do we just send an email to the DPU, or how do we do that?
We file it with our annual DPU report.
Every year.
But yep, once a year. But I think if you take the PCA off the bill completely, and then when we need the flexibility of either raising additional capital or reducing our capital, then all of a sudden it shows up on the bill. That's gonna, I think, predict, I think that will have us have a lot more phone calls than if it's there every month. It changing versus it disappearing and coming back is going to be a lot more confusing to customers.
Okay, I was picturing it disappearing forever. And what would change would be the energy charge and the capacity charge, because that's what it actually is that we're charging for.
Okay, we tried that in the past.
Oh,
And then when we started to run short of revenue, revenue was deficit, we had a problem adding it back.
What-
It took us a while to get approval to add it back. And I know it's just a filing, but we had to go back and we had to change our rate structure. And that takes time to put it back in. I mean,
are you talking about putting the power cost adjustment back in?
right, we
Because
took
I'm
it,
talking about, don't put the power cost adjustment back in, just raise the energy charge and the capacity charge to reflect the actual costs incurred.
because so then we have two variable components of the bill, the energy and the capacity.
Well, they do vary, don't they? I mean, what we're trying to do is assign costs where they actually hit us.
They do
Is
vary.
it just too hard to do?
It's a lot more to explain to a customer, I think, when you have more than one component of a bill changing than
Uh-huh.
the one component than the PCA.
So when people call and ask questions, you feel like explaining the power cost adjustment will be easier than
I do.
explaining the other two components moving.
And I don't know if the DPU will allow us to have all those variable components, because it's never been that way in the past. And I think
They
that's why
expect us to file our rates once a year, and that's that.
no, I mean, being able to change the bills monthly or quarterly. If our capacity goes to the roof all of a sudden, we're not going to change our capacity charge. We're going to change our power cost adjustment.
Okay. To me, I don't see the difference. It's a customer's bill going up, but and to me, if it's the energy charge that goes up, I would understand that better. Oh, the energy charge has gone up because it's costing more. I have found the power cost adjustment confusing, but maybe that's just me. So we'll take this with, I'm sorry?
I can do some research to see if we can have more than one variable component on the bill, or more than two.
Well,
I didn't think we could. I don't know the logic behind it.
Okay, well, I would love to, well, yeah, okay. Well, we'll consider, maybe we'll take this offline and think about it more deeply. But thank you.
Yeah,
Um,
there is something that some utilities do. It's usually because of a limitation of the billing systems, but they will not show the power cost adjustment separately on the bill. Any changes to the power supply cost adjustment just automatically goes into the energy on what's shown on a customer's bill. But then you got to issue a transparency.
Well, if it's really for energy, to me, it seems more transparent, but that's evidently just me. We'll look at it some more offline. Thanks.
Okay.
Anything else before we have Mark move on? Okay. And the other rates are very, they're very similar and they're based on the components that currently exist in those rates. Do you want to walk through them? You may not need to touch on every rate, but
Yeah, just go to
look at a
the
rate that's
bigger
different.
ones.
Yeah.
Just go to the bigger
You
ones,
wanna-
Mike.
Okay. This one.
This one would be a good one. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
this is the small general service class.
Mhm.
This one again, we're moving the customer charges, facilities charges higher. From a little less than 11 to 13, 15, and then 17, similar to the residential. The energy component, again, went from 5 cents to 8.19. And the capacity transmission distributions is the balancing effect, basically.
Mhm.
Overall, again, a 6.6% adjustment. And you can see that in year one, there's no dramatic changes. In other words, nobody's going to see, they're all going to be centered around that 6.6% as far as percentage changes. It might vary from 5% to 8%, but basically in that ballpark of around 7. Is there any questions about this rate?
So
Mike?
if you,
Oh,
so
go ahead.
is it, I can't remember, I don't remember numbers well. Is the energy charge the same as for residential or is it different in year one?
Pretty
Mike, is
similar.
it,
They're all pretty similar. But
Okay.
there are slight differences.
Yeah, what would make it
This one's the
different?
same.
Yeah, it's the
819.
same.
Yep.
What would cause it to be different, a different energy charge? Because
That's a
I
great
presume that's like
question.
per kilowatt hour, right?
It's a little different than that. When you purchase energy from the market, it has both a capacity component and an energy component
Mhm.
built into it. And
Mhm.
these different classes, they're using differing amounts at the time of your system peaks when those capacity costs are determined.
Mhm.
And so in the cost of service study, that's one of the things we model is how much is each class using at the time of the system peaks. But I think in your case, most of them are very similar, but
Mhm.
they may not be identical.
Mhm. Okay. So this would look very different under a time of use regime.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Um,
Okay. So we were looking at, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. We were looking at the small,
yeah,
Okay, here are the
before
demand
we move
rates.
on, is there any other questions on the small general service?
Guess not.
Okay. Now this next rate has what's called the demand charge buried within it. So you see that the demand charge, which is in the center part of the table, you're currently charging $11.98, and we're recommending about $1 increase in that. Now that demand charge is primarily there to recover your distribution infrastructure cost. So when you look at the capacity transmission distribution charge, you see that number below 3 cents. And the reason is that's being recovered through that demand component buried in the rate. So what demand is, your metering identifies the customer's peak usage throughout the year, throughout the month. And that identifies how much distribution capacity is needed by that customer. It's a more accurate way of actually billing than having a demand charge than not having a demand charge.
It's a more accurate way of billing for distribution in particular.
Correct.
Mhm.
That's correct. Yeah. Now this class, we gave them a 5% adjustment rather than the 6.6 or 6%, because the cost of service study said that identified that these rates were slightly over recovering.
Mhm.
So we did not give them as big of an increase. So you see the 5% adjustment. And most of that obviously is in that increase in the demand charge.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay.
All right. This next one is your large general service. And again, you have the demand charge, which we increased again $1. And this is also about a 5% overall rate adjustment. And these rate adjustments are pretty flat. In other words, almost everybody in that class is going to see about a 5% adjustment.
So I'm confused. How is this different from the rate you just showed us? Wasn't that for large general service?
Yeah, this
This is
has
larger general service.
this is larger. Yeah.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
You done with that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. You can go on. Let's see.
That was it.
For the
Yeah,
big
the other
ones,
ones are
right?
pretty small.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask now if there are questions from the board on anything we've covered so far that we haven't hit or from anyone in the public or comments? I'm kind of looking. I don't see any, but if you use your raise hand function on Zoom, it'll pop to the top and I'll see you. Joan,
Mark, I don't see a separate rate for electric heat pumps. Where would you put them in? What rate?
You talking about residential or are you talking about commercial?
Residential.
do you mean like a residential all electric rate? For
Yep.
someone who has whole house heat pumps?
Right.
Mhm.
What category would you put them in? The regular residential? Or would it be the general service heat residential?
Mark and I discussed this, and it was all part of the time of use. If we can, and we can bill the time of use, they would be in time of use.
But that seems like it's gonna be a ways down the road.
I'm not sure. I think we still need to have that discussion whether we can implement and bill time of use, and if we can't, then we need to have an all electric rate.
And what would the reason for an all electric rate be?
They have a different load profile from the average residential.
A better one? A better load factor?
Typically, not always, but typically, yes. When you get into heat pumps, then you have a better load profile. If you get into all electric with resistant heat, the load profiles actually gets worse. That's part of the reason why you want a time of use rate to automatically adjust for that. So it kind of but heat pumps is what does improve your load profile. Resistant heat, not as much. The benefit with resistant heat is it tends to be winter usage, which in most parts of the country, the market prices are cheaper in the winter, but in New England, it's not. It's actually reversed.
So if I understand your answer to Joan's question, if we did not do time of use rates, you would expect there to be a residential whole house heat pump rate.
Correct.
Okay.
Heat pumps, yes, heat pumps, correct.
Okay.
Not necessarily all electric, but heat pumps, yeah.
Okay, Tom.
So we have customers calling now, looking to get on this general service heat for, because they put heat pumps in and they're looking to get on this rate. So, our answer has been that they stay on the residential rate, which is the correct answer, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but this heat rate that we're looking at here, if I could critique it for a moment. One of the issues, and we're hesitant to make this change because of the customer impacts. But you see, you give block 1 0 to 10 kW. They're not charged anything for that. Normally, when that happens, when we see that, there's something that's called a blocked energy rate, where the first probably 1,000 kilowatt hours at 0 to 10 would be set at a higher rate than the excess because they're not charged the demand component. So my point being is if you put a residential customer on this, they're going to be undercharged because they probably won't exceed that 10 kW. So we will not be recovering our distribution infrastructure appropriately.
I guess this is a question for Tom about this because I did try from reading the rate, tried to understand how one qualifies for this rate, and it wasn't clear to me. Tom, you're muted.
I believe the customers on this rate were customers with a separate meter for heat. Steve, is that correct?
So we have, so we have a good amount of customers. I don't know the number, but these are the customers that have no fossil fuels in their homes. And they're all resistive heating.
Mm,
So, just kind of going back into the history, like, you do see some that stay below the 10 kW mark at block 1, but there are customers they exceed the block 2.
Hmm.
But the criteria to get on this rate is you cannot have oil, natural gas in their home. It has to be all electric, no propane either.
okay, so this is historical for people with resistive heating. That's how it came to be.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. Okay,
Yeah, this is something like Mike said. I think that the solution to this, it will be time of use.
mhm,
Because that will automatically adjust for load profile differences.
mhm.
And probably promote heat pumps, which is a better, like I said, a better load profile than resistive heat.
So if we went to a time of use rate, we would get rid of this rate then.
In time, that'd be a decision for the board.
Mhm.
The one thing, that I'm always hesitant to do is to move too quickly anywhere in any direction. Because I know you don't have a lot of customers on this, but if we put these customers on time of use, what I'd be afraid of is somebody's going to see a 20 or 30% increase in their bill, and others might see a decrease. And that could come back to give you, a lot of people complaining. So I tend to want to move slowly in that. Either we could possibly in developing the time use rate for this class, if we have the load profiles for a sample set of this, customers in this, we can model what the potential impacts would be to give the board some comfort that there isn't going to be those 20 or 30% increases.
That would seem very valuable. How many customers do we have on this rate, roughly?
126.
I'm sorry?
126.
Okay.
126 people on basically resistive baseboard heat. That would save considerable amount of money if they were able to go to some kind of heat pump, mini split, for example.
Yeah.
And typically I would expect to see higher electrical usage for nighttime heating, because it's obviously colder and there's no passive solar heating. So I would expect the time of use rate to be even more beneficial for those people.
Okay, are there any other rates you think that we should take a look at, Mark, while you're here?
Mike, why don't you just scan through it? I think we probably covered the major ones.
The big ones.
Yeah.
And, I had a little time to look at it yesterday, but I'll have more time after this meeting to kind of absorb it better.
With electric heat, same issue.
General service heat. Yeah.
General service, yeah. Looks like you got more on that though, general speed.
Hmm.
Oh, you got 127 on that, so it's pretty similar.
Interesting.
There's your farm.
So did we have this rate before? We must have this rate. Is this rate on our website? I'm not familiar with it.
We only have one customer on this rate.
Okay.
I don't believe it's on our new
Yeah,
website because we had
because it's
to.
not of
and
general
after one-
interest.
No, we had two, and that has one has since been developed into condos.
Yes.
So now we currently have one, so.
Uh-huh.
It's not on our website.
I wonder
Interesting.
what the impact would be on this customer if we rolled them into one of the other rates and just eliminated this one altogether. It's just an option to think
Yeah,
about.
it's probably 20%, it looks like, something like that. I think
Know
they go
that
on to this.
Concord has a farm rate that they are required to keep for some reason, which may have to do with, I don't know what it has to do with, perhaps their town meeting requirements or something. Town meeting can't require anything. I don't know why.
Danvers have the same because they get a discount. They get a discount being a farm. Their rates based on a discount, and that's something big in Massachusetts. Well, I wasn't involved in that, but I did hear it.
Yeah, generally, we don't have that kind of regulation from the state about our rates, so, and yeah, I don't know. Well, I was surprised to see it, that's all. Perhaps when we look at the time of use rate structure, we can imagine what the impact would be on that customer and convince that customer that they'll be fine on the on this residential time of use rate.
You didn't look at this. This was like
Or
a sample.
business, whatever it is. Mhm. Okay, low income rate. So
Yeah, it was a sample that I put together. Basically,
Mhm.
it's reflecting a 20% low income discount off the current rate.
Mhm.
That's what it would look like. I've just made the assumption that 10% of the customers would switch over to it.
Mhm. Okay, hard to know what that percent would be, but
Correct.
we can do some research with the town and ask how many people they have qualifying for property tax discounts based on income and that sort of thing. Maybe get a feel for it. And so this represents not recovering all that this group of people is using, and so the rest, so it gets spread out over the rest of the rates to make up the revenue requirement. Am I saying that right?
Well, actually, what I did was I calculated how much it would be based on those assumptions, and it came up to about 180,000. And then I ran it through the projection to see whether there would need to be any additional rate change, and it didn't. It didn't need an additional rate change for that.
I'm sorry, say that again. I'm not sure I understood what you said.
I calculated how much revenue you would have based on these numbers, how much revenue loss you would have, and then I put that back into the cost of service and made sure that the rate track of the 6% was still applicable.
Okay,
I
so it was
think-
small enough that it didn't have a large impact on everybody else.
It was at this level, yeah, but you
Yeah.
know, if the level was something else, we'd have to consider
Mhm.
changing the rate track.
Okay, well, that's very helpful. Thank you. Gives us a feel for it anyway, which I didn't have any idea what the impact might be if we did something like this. So this is helpful.
So Mike, I think you said it was $180,000 if 10%
Yeah,
of the residentials.
It was. I ran it through at 200,000 just to be on the safe side, just in case they had a few more here, and then basically as negative income, and it really let me have the same rate track without that much happening. So we left it at that.
Okay. All right. Are there any other rates we need to take a look at?
No, I think we covered
Okay.
all the major ones.
Okay. So what are our next steps?
From my standpoint, it sounds like you want to talk more about the power cost adjustment.
Mhm.
And if you want us to roll that into the energy charge, it's not going to change anything you're seeing here other than it's going to move that power cost adjustment into the energy charge
Mhm.
and zero it out. That's probably the major one, the major question, I believe.
Transparency. Okay. I'm just writing down what the topic is.
So do we have some excuse me, do we have some proposed numbers for what the time of use would look like for us to consider?
Yeah, we have for the power supply, but we then, well, once this is complete, we can then overlay it to make sure we recover our distribution revenues. Distribution revenue requirements.
Because from my standpoint, if I'm seeing customers having the choice of either staying with the traditional type rate structure that we've gone through, or opting in or opting out of time of use rates, I think that's something we should try and roll out sooner rather than later.
What Mike was showing here is,
You'd actually asked this.
oh, go ahead, Mike.
Well, you'd asked about this, Joan had asked about it, so I'd completely forgotten until I opened this up, but this is what the solar valuation was.
I'm sorry, what is it we're looking at?
This is the solar
Oh.
evaluation, what we should be charging.
What we should be charging for what?
Crediting.
What we should be
this-
crediting?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Joan, is that what you had your hand up about?
Yep, yeah, I
Okay.
didn't see any. I want to go over the solar credit calculation and the impact it's gonna have on our rates and
Yeah,
revenue.
let's do that.
you can see the solar valuation, shows 13 cents. And of course, that's based on current power supply cost. My biggest caution or consideration for the board on this is if we were to go all the way to the 13 cents and power supply costs change and come down, then we're going to be over crediting and then we'd have to lower it, which sometimes can be an issue also. When customers make a decision on whether or not to install solar and they look at that 13 cents and make an economic decision on it, and then in 2 or 3 years we come back and lower it to say 11 cents because the market price changes, it changes the economics of their solar array.
Mhm.
And these are just things to think about moving forward if you wanted to go all the way to the 13 cents, because part of that's being driven because of the market prices.
Mhm.
So I just want to
Of
make you aware
today.
of that. Of today, yeah.
Mhm.
But it is, solar has a significant advantage in your area. I mean, it's showing up. That's the highest we've ever calculated, to be honest with you.
Wow.
The highest we calculated before was about 9.5 cents. And this is calculated out of 13 cents. Believe me, Mike and I went through this with a fine tooth comb because I had a hard time believing it.
And why is it so different? know?
Because, yeah, it's because the energy prices are so high.
By our area, you mean the Northeast?
Your area.
Okay.
Yeah, the Northeast, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at the different components in that blue box, this is for a 1 kW solar array, which is what we ran through the model, and we use the solar production characteristics from the federal websites. But if you look at demand savings, 1 kW annually would save you about $6.95 on capacity cost, $43 on transmission cost, and $111 on energy savings. So, and that's what we use to calculate, what that rate should be on an average per kilowatt hour.
Well, that is, that's very interesting. I guess we'll have to have a discussion about, on the one hand, people do want to be able to project what their savings is going to be over 20 years. And on the other hand, I don't know, maybe, I do you think looking at historical energy trends would help a lot, or are things just changing so fast and so So, I mean, for example, if those wind farms off of Massachusetts get built, it's possible energy costs will come down in a way that we would notice. So maybe looking at historical energy costs wouldn't help us that much. We have to project somehow.
Well, it would give us a little bit, I actually like that idea. Because it gives us justification for a different rate, because that would be more the historical norm.
Mhm.
Like I said, my biggest concern with going to the 13 cents is what it would do to the customers that rely on that price signal.
Yeah.
That would give us more of a justification to bring it down some into something that we feel is going to be more realistic for them to make an economic decision moving forward. So I kind of like that idea, to run that through the model.
Or to do like a historical look at the energy prices.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, that would be
just the
helpful
energy
information.
piece.
Yeah.
I have a
Just
question
the-
there. If we look at what has happened in California and the Southwest, where solar deployment is much higher, what we're seeing is, the middle of the day becomes very, very cheap with this large production of solar, and such that if you move to a time of use rate where you have peak and off peak rates, the effective price that solar is getting in the wholesale market is much less than the peak rate, because they're producing the most when prices are the cheapest. And so, I'd be a little bit uncomfortable of looking to history, which doesn't show that changing production profile that we should expect to see more of in the future with more solar production. What we will see is that the more we produce, the cheaper prices will be in the middle of the day. And therefore, the cheaper the solar rate should be relative to the peak time of use rate to have a correct price signal.
That is a very good point. And you're right, they have that duck curve because of the amount of solar they have. And
Yeah.
when we do the work in California, the middle of the day is, I don't want to call it off peak. They usually have 3 tiers, off peak, on peak, and critical peak. But so normally what happens is they end up getting the on peak credit, which is probably going to be more indicative of the true value. Then as their profiles and things change, that would automatically self-adjust if we were to, because the way your rates are structured, you have a credit, an energy credit already built into the rate, so to speak, that we could pass on. But the reason it's 8 cents there and 13 cents here is because they're using it, or they're producing at a better time of the day when market prices are higher. And also it offsets demand and transmission. And that's why that's going up to 13 cents. Now, if we did a time of use rate, that time of use period will automatically compensate for that. So what you're saying is totally right. I'm agreeing with you, just saying it in a more complex way.
My
Thank you.
recollection when we last talked about this was that we would imagine the credit changing through, over time of the day, just like the rate, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Unfortunately, I've got about 5 minutes left.
Okay.
Mike, just in that 5 minutes, do you have the time of use summary?
Yeah, I think I've got time of use rate here. There's a time of use rate. This was the time of use rate. It's not ready for showing people, but it is the time. I mentioned the 3.7. This is summer. So summer off peak would be 7 cents, 26 on peak. That's a 3.7 multiplier, 7 cents in winter, 7.5 cents off peak, 13.5 cents on peak.
And you're not thinking that three times makes sense for us?
It may eventually. We would phase it. We would probably recommend that you phase it in over I don't know, 3-5 years,
Mhm.
just to give people time to adjust to the fact that during the peak times in summer, you're going to be paying 25 cents. Get ready for it.
And
Make the
how
most of
many,
it.
how many hours is each? What did you?
It was
I
based
assume
on
there's a projection
these
for the
hours.
hours. So hours 9 to
These are the
20.
winter. Winter, just make it so color so you can see. Winter, I'm starting at 8 o'clock. This is our endings of 8 o'clock through 8 o'clock. And then summer is a shorter period. It's from 1 o'clock through 7 o'clock. And that's based on the times that you're hitting your peaks in the summer. Well, your peaks occur in the summer, not hitting them.
So
all
if
the
people,
peaks
if
occur.
people were getting a like a on-peak rate at 9 o'clock in the morning, wouldn't that be a bigger hit than starting off with a mid-peak rate, which goes up some, but not all?
In the summer, you mean?
Yeah.
Winter.
Yeah, in the summer, we did a similar thing recently where we'd have a critical peak here. The model isn't set up for a critical peak, but we'd have the critical peak and then have the off peak there. So it would look something like that with two being a critical peak.
Yeah, because I would
And
just
that's
think if we're
easy to
charging,
change.
if we're charging on peak from 9 to 10 in the morning when it in fact isn't a peak hour, that doesn't seem.
Oh, sorry, you meant the winter one? This
Yeah.
one? Okay.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant.
Yeah, but it is actually though, because
It does reflect reality.
you have hit a peak at that time in winter. That's why I've set it
But
there.
it's not the same as our peak that's like from 5 to 7 in the evening, right? Or I guess it'll
It
change
is.
anyway.
It's one of those here
Okay.
in winter. You got a February peak,
Mm,
which is why I've set it at 9.
mhm,
That's the only one.
mhm.
So it might be maybe push it to 12, and that would increase that differential for winter. This is it's a work in progress.
Yes,
It's something
yeah,
we
okay.
need to
We won't-
discuss with you
we won't-
guys.
We
Yeah.
won't grill you about this. Just
I
yet.
just
No,
made
that-
sure that I got everything in it.
Great.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point because that 9 a.m. peak only occurred the one time in our test. Which maybe what we could do is in the winter do the same thing as what you showed in the summer, Mike, and
Yeah.
have an on peak and a critical peak, so 3 time periods.
Yeah, I think that's a conversation for later down the road when we decide what level of complexities we want to introduce and what the billing system can handle and what the staff at Hingham can handle. There's other issues with regards to the discount for energy and how would we deal with that, whether we need 2 time of use rates, one for the capacity and transmission and one for the energy. All of they need to be thrashed out before we get into the weeds and then start manipulating things, because we don't want to create something for multiple purposes if we're not going to use them.
Mhm. Okay, well, we will talk about that when the time comes, when you have something that you are feel good about getting into depth with. Okay, so I think we may be at the end of our work for today. Is there anybody from the public who has a question or comment on what we've done so far today? We have taken no action. Okay, I don't see any. So unless there's anything else, I want to thank Mark and Mike. This has just been really informative. And we look forward to the next round of discussion. And anything else, Tom?
No, I think we covered everything we had planned to cover today.
Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Where'd Mike go? Oh, Mike's.
He's
I
looking.
think Mike seconded that.
Seconded.
Okay, All in favor, Mike,
Aye.
Tyler,
I,
Laura, aye. Thank you very much, everyone. Great meeting.
All right.
Take
Thank
care.
you. Thank you, Mike. Thanks.
Everyone.
Thank you, Mark.
Bye-bye.